Okay.
All right, everybody. This is so exciting. Not just because we have a wonderful guest, Thom Reed, is because anybody watches the show, we know that a lot of things we talk about, we go through videos, articles, but not every day you can actually talk to the person who's actually at the event, where the event itself, where the guest is the major part of the event. I don't want to call it a story because it's not a story, it's an event. Stories, when you hear that word, it's like it's make believe. This is exciting because something happened, people. Something happened in September of 1969 in Berkshire. And the way I like to do this is I want everybody in the chat who's watching this right now, forget what you learned. Forget what's in the books, what you see in videos, unsolved mysteries. We got Thom Reed himself. He could probably tell us what best happened in September of 1969 because he was there. I mean, it's wrapped around. So Thom, first of all, thank you for coming on. This is fantastic. Sure. And like I was saying, see, I know everybody knows you, but say the people who are coming in don't know you and don't know what happened in Berkshire in 1969. What did happen in 1969 in Berkshire?
Yeah, and I'm glad you ruled out or cast away the term story because that gets old after a while because it's not a story. A story is to entertain, and we're finally writing a book now too to preserve what really happened because it has gotten turned into a circus, and this is why I speak out as much as I do because I want to make sure that people know what really happened. Like there's a lot of articles out there that talk about, the 40 people that saw it. It wasn't 40. That article has been misspun so many times. 40 people came to the unveiling of the monument in memory of what happened by the state of Massachusetts. There were over 250 witnesses that actually saw it. I mean, there's just been one mistake after another. And then one article picks up this person's article. Next minute, you're like, I'm going to have to go in the air again and talk to Eric because people don't really know what the hell to believe anymore. The journalism has gotten ridiculous, right?
We don't. That's the biggest problem, and it's nobody's fault. It's just,
it's just what happens.
It's what happens,
right?
And it's not. It's like, you went on Fox. You've been on Fox News. You've been on news channels, but not everybody sees those channels. So we are. I'm not saying it's fair or not, but we are judging. We don't think of it as events. We're thinking of stories because we're reading it through a story.
Right,
right. Saying, it's not a story. It's actually.
I get it.
It happened.
I get it. So what I'll cover tonight, if we have time, is the key things to this is that it wasn't really. First of all, there were over 250 witnesses. It happened 3 or 4 times in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't just one time. There are multiple crafts. We had a diner where everyone pretty much talked about this. It was visited by those who worked on a space race, Sprague Electric, Berkshire Dynamics, Command Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, all kind of ate in our diner because in the 60s we had a jukebox, and that's where people came to eat and listen to music. And it was also down the road from a racetrack. So anybody with a little bit of extra money back in the day, they came to our diner, they ate and went to the track, right? So that diner that my family owned is really what really set this apart from everyone else, because the conversations in there were recorded because of police reports that took place. That's something nobody covers. Then, of course, my father ended up running for office and was an attorney, and spoke with Muhammad Rabidin, who at the time was the president of the Parapsychology Society, along with our attorney, Robert Bletchman, who mentioned our case in support of GA 33426, which was this idea of all our nations getting together and sharing information. And my father was murdered on the anniversary of that date. And so, because he was also very political and had ties in the community, the Historical Society and everyone else looked into it. And when they found the old archives, the old media outlets who ran our stories about it or articles about it, they found that. I took my polygraph test, and they couldn't rule out that this was historically true. And that's how it got inducted. I can get into details about that, but that's not something you hear on Unsolved Mysteries. That's not something a lot of these other shows want to cover. They just want the wow. They want to, then they sensationalize what little bit they covered accurately. And before you know it, none of it's true. And so, right, that's what happens. And then those who look into it don't know what to believe anymore. Right. It's like, where do I mine for this information? The other thing that's important.
Where do I go? Yeah,
exactly. So, the other part of this that I think is crucial in the overall picture of this is that Roswell played a part in our case getting inducted. The attorneys that worked with the state of Massachusetts, her name primarily Debbie, not Debbie Aberman, she was with the Historical Society, Debbie Smith, and the Kessler Law Firm. They actually went to the Roswell Research Library and mined for information or documents, or what they consider to be source documents, that they could send back to the governor's office and the primarily the director of the Historical Society, who wanted to compile enough information that when this went to a census or a ruling, that she had enough source documentation to say, look, this really did happen. Whether or not we believe it, or we don't follow this topic or support the topic or whatever. Happened. You can't rule out that it happened. And like she had said to me, it's just like, Billy the Kid altered the railroad. So, it's historically significant. If you alter the natural progression of a community and it was that impactful, it's historically true, whether it's Jack the Ripper or it's something very positive. Either way, if you change a community's direction and you divide a community, it's that profound that whatever that was is historically true. And that's how they pitched it to the governor's office, that, look, this was historically true. It was dynamic enough that it altered the natural, the growth or the projection or where this community was going, completely. And so with all that happening, yeah, we had to move the whole bit. So to get into what really happened, or what actually happened that night, I was actually riding on a 4-H horse show. I was riding a horse, and we had left early on September 1st. And again, September 1st, 1969 was a holiday. It was Labor Day. So all these people were outside having campfires and barbecues, and there were parades and everything. I was actually in the parade earlier that day, as pictures of it on Unsolved Mysteries.
Makes sense why everybody's outside.
Yeah, one of the reasons so many people saw it, right?
Perfect.
And right. So it was a holiday. And so being in an area like that, people were next to others that they wouldn't have normally associated with. They just happened to be with. So it wasn't like I saw it, my mother saw it, my friend saw it. It was like hundreds of people saw it, that many of them never even met before. And so when we left, we went to the diner, the Village on the Green Diner, which is now Roberto's in Sheffield, Massachusetts. It's a pizza house now. We went in there to let the lock up, send our cook home, that kind of thing, put the chairs up and get ready for the following day. And so being that it was running kind of late and we had school the next day, we were going a shortcut through this bridge, the Sheffield covered bridge. And as we entered it, I mean, it was rickety. The planks went up, clack, 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 as you drove, everybody, it was like a 5-mile-an-hour thing. We weren't like racing through the bridge, right? We were going almost walking speed. And we were in a station wagon. My mother was driving. My grandmother was in the passenger seat, and my brother was behind me to my right. And when we came out of the bridge, it was like a little bit of a dip. So you had to go slow too, because the car would bottom out, right? We came out on this dirt road with a bunch of potholes and everything. And off to the left, my grandmother was the first to notice this sphere. It was like a round ball of light, like a 2-watt bulb maybe. It was crisp. and it rose from the banks of the Housatonic River. And I'll wait. Yeah, so it just like, so I'm looking out the window and I see this ball of light like this, and it got to a certain height and paused. And we were still going forward, like really just creeping. And all of a sudden, these rods of light shot from the sides of it. So if you got a ball, it didn't come from the bottom like it showed in Ancient Aliens. It came from the sides and shot into the water. So it looked like a sugar cone, like a sugar ice cream cone. And then it stayed there for a minute. We're still going down the road. My mom's like barely moving at this point because she's looking out the window too. My brother looks to the right, and there's another one just off the water, which was orange. It was like had
She's
that
probably
moving.
scared too. Why she's going slow?
No, we weren't really scared, but just kind of in awe, kind of like what, And then there's nothing to be. Why be scared, right? It's a ball. So the thing was turning on one over the water. So we're looking back and forth, like, what is this? What's going on? Because we weren't novice to this. This had been seen before, and that's the key point. Because if it was the first time you saw it, you would have probably been scared. But this happens so often in the area. It's like the Skinwalker Ranch of Sheffield, Massachusetts. I mean, stuff happens all the time. So it wasn't like we hadn't seen things before, but this was the first time that we saw it that close, right? So with that said, we had a sphere off to our right, another sphere off to our left, and so we're cutting them, and my mom's still going down this road, and while we are, the one on the left starts going in the direction of her vehicle, but it was behind the line of trees. The rods of light had gone or retracted, so we basically have a large sphere behind a line of trees. This one we never saw, we didn't see it anymore, and we kept going down, and this thing was kind of going in the same.
Was it a clear day too?
No, man, this was night. This was like 8:30, quarter 9 night.
I mean clear night, because I know some people say, well, it's probably a ball of electricity, lightning ball. I want to eliminate that.
No, we watched it for about 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. So
yeah,
so there's no way, in your opinion, that could be a lightning. No,
ball. Man, this was it. We watched it rise from the banks of the river. Wow. It was like the size of 4 Volkswagen Bugs. It was seen by a lot of people too. Not that matters. I'm just saying, but it looked like a cue ball, from a pool table with a little bit of a sheen to it. And it fired these lights, and they went back up, and then it rose and went in the same direction of the car. So as we're going down the dirt road, my mother finds a clearing off to the left with these, just where we're going to see this thing in a minute because it was going this way. So let's stop and see if we can see it again, because we wanted to see the sphere. And when we stopped, there's a telephone pole there, by the way. It's still there to this day. I know exactly where it was. And yeah, it was just there, filming again. Cool. And I was like, it gives me the creeps when I'm there. It really does. It bothers you. There's something very weird about that area. So anyway, we're parked, and we're looking off to the left, looking for that sphere that was coming in the same direction as our vehicle. And at that point, we saw this disc. It was probably 100 yards easily. It looked like a turtle shell. I've always mentioned that it looked like a turtle shell. As a child, I referenced things as what, just like our ancestors did, right? It looked like a chariot on fire. I mean, it looked like a turtle shell to me. And it looked like 2 sandwiched together. But the middle of it, what made up the lion's share of the entire disc. I mean, that's where the majority of the craft was its center, with a very low top and a very low bottom. But the middle was heavy. And so this is what, to me, is something that screams authenticity when I talk to Kirchdorfer, who was also Melanie, who was also in Unsolved Mysteries. She's the only one that ever mentioned that it put out a reddish tint, and it did. The whole skin of it put out like a reddish glow or like an amber light, and so that bled through it. So like, I don't know if it was the front or not, but what? I'm sorry.
That's got to be powerful to make everything else like change the color with it. I mean, that's got to be some kind of energy that coming out.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, and I think that there was a communication between the 3 objects too, because if you look at how we were positioned, with the craft being at like 10 o'clock and the sphere we had seen maybe at 7 o'clock, and then the other one over here like 4 or 5 o'clock, we were basically in the center of these 3 objects. So what we noticed personally was that, it sounded like stones started tapping on the fender walls. We had stopped, but all of a sudden we heard this tap, 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 like ting, 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 like that. It was the first thing we noticed. And then it was like we were shoved under the deep end of a swimming pool. like just like muffled. My mother mentions like, like a tightness, like being wrapped in saran wrap really tight or something like that, where you can't really breathe, like that pressure you feel underwater.
Damn.
And
And all of you and your brother felt that too. Was it just
all
you
of
and your
us
mom?
did.
Every
No, it
single
was
one
my
of you.
grandmother, all of us did.
Wow.
And then it was just like everything became like surreal. The windows were open. We're looking at this thing. All of a sudden, we're all feeling kind of funky. I remember the dashboard. All of a sudden, I could see the dashboard clear as day. I could see the back of my grandmother's head, my mother. I mean, we had blue seats at the time. I could see the inside of the vehicle. It was like the dome light was on, but it wasn't, right? It was just all of a sudden, bang, everything was
Were
really
you still
super
not
clear.
scared at that moment?
I don't know what I felt. The way we were feeling, the way we were affected, I think we were more concerned about our health, like what was going on. Like all of a sudden, it was just like, uh, it was so, it was like surreal. It was kind of like watching the Dolphins game yesterday, 70-20. You're like, did that just happen? You're kind of like,
I love that score because I hate Russell Wilson, what he did to our team. But
yeah.
I was just curious because I was just wondering when that light hits. Because I'm just wondering if that light.
Well, we didn't see a light. We did not see a light hit yet.
Oh, not a light yet. Okay.
No.
I was just curious if something's making you feel not scared.
No, we're still in the car, and all of a sudden we can see. Right? Like, this is what I'm trying to say. This is what is so hard to make sense of. All of a sudden we could kind of see, right? And then all of a sudden everything went dead. There were no crickets, no katydids, no breeze. It was just like our ears were plugged. You couldn't hear anything, yet you could see vaguely, but you could see enough that it was more so than a minute ago. So the light was amplified. The sound was muted. Our bodies felt like we were wrapped in like some type of, belts or something. It was just unbelievable. And I remember like going over forward and staring at the dashboard. Then there was this flash of light. Everything just was like boof, like unbelievable. I mean, it was just like, then it was just like, my God, it was so bright. I can't even explain it, and then bang, everything came back to life. Like the crickets, the Katie, all of a sudden everything was over. It was like whatever we were part of, it's like we became part of something. And while we were in this, whatever it was, it ended with this like lightning flash type of thing. It wasn't lightning, but you know what I mean? Like this flash of light. And then everything was dark in the car again. Everything was normal. It was the strangest thing. I can't make out why that would happen. I've tried to make sense of it, and it just doesn't, I can't make sense of something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, but then I remember right afterwards, that's the last thing I remember from being in the car. And again, I was sitting behind my mother. My grandmother was to my right. It was four of us. Then I remember being in like a larger airplane hangar. It almost looked like an airplane hangar to me. My parents were both pilots, so small engine pilots. So I've been in airplane hangars before. So again, I reference an airplane because it's the closest thing I can describe to what it was like. I remember being grabbed my left arm. It hurt. I was pushed through a door, taken down this hallway. And like a lot of other people say, I remember being on some type of a table. I believe it was almost like a white. There was like glass in there. It looked like glass from an MRI type setup.
When you said grab, are you talking about like not grabbed by your mom or brother?
Oh no, something grabbed me hard, and it hurt. It hurt, and I was like pushed through a door. Like, so whoever was walking me was behind me, not in front of me, and pushing me forward. And I was taken out. There was like this little door, and on the other side of that, there were these tall walls. Everything was pretty much, again, white. Everything, a lot of white. And I was taken down this hallway to the right where it teed off. It wasn't like it banked off or was rounded or really kind of contemporary or modern looking. It looked very industrial, And then I was taken into this room that had like a glass in, like back in the day, you had those glass bricks. People would make a glass. Yes. Almost like that. It had this glassed in area and a abode like this. And there was a pocket on the right and a pocket on the left where doors were. So I was laying on this table and this apparatus came over me, which had holes in the sides of it. It was in two parts, one part lowered, and the other one went over it. And these holes lined up and these packs were put on my body. It looked like raisins. They're like large raisins. I kind of went out. I remember at one point I was there for a while. Went to run at one point, was brought back, and I remember seeing, like 3 or 4 beans around me. I had hits to my head, and then I was back in this area where
You did try to run from it.
Oh yeah, I did. Well, that's just it too. Like at one point, I'm like, I'm going along with things, I guess, because why wouldn't I have run earlier? But then all of a sudden, this anxious or anxiety came over me. It was almost like whatever, like I said, whatever this was seemed to be like on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, off again, And I think that those raisin packs they put on my body, I believe that was probably the carno, unless there was something was exchanged. I have no friggin' idea. But I mean, it's confusing, but I also don't believe I was on a craft at that point, which is why I don't say I was abducted in '69, because where I was much bigger than the craft itself, a lot larger than the craft itself. Even that was 100 yards, but this place was massive. There was all these manufacturing facilities in the area. We were mining for the magnesium for the atom bomb at the lime fields, lime quarries, I should say. There was a magnesium spill underneath the water at one point. There's government coming out of the woods. People are seeing it all the time. It's nothing new, There's a power grid not far from the
You
park.
think the government might be involved in this?
Oh, I've always said that. I've said that from day one, and that's one of the reasons I think the state of Massachusetts was more apt to do something with it too, because it's no secret there. It's no secret. I mean, the goodwill message that went to the moon and was left there by Buzz Aldrin, the people who manufactured that knew my parents. They ate in our diner. It came from the Berkshires. Command Aerospace is there. Pratt and Whitney, Berkshire Dynamics, General Electric. There was a nuclear power plant not far from there. The magnesium that was mined for the atom bomb came. Back in the 60s, the money that was filtered from our government to NASA was filtered back into the Berkshires. Do you know NASA used to be in Massachusetts too? NASA was only 2 hours away. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. Actually, no,
yeah, NASA was near MIT. What's that?
I'm sorry to think this, but it makes you wonder if NASA, government, because what you just explained, the is nuclear age where they're mining for stuff like did they create this thing to happen to people so people would stay away from that area? I mean, I'm just thinking conspiracy. I'm just thinking like, did they did this on purpose to scare people on purpose, or do you think that's a little bit far stretched? No, this was
no. I believe that there's a lot. I believe that there was a back engineering process back in the 60s, and I'll get to more of that and why I believe that too. I'll show you some documents. I got them next to me. So with that, but there is a connection, and you're right, between government and the off-world topic and this this idea of back engineering, using whatever technology they could find to try to beat Russia to space type of thing. I think at that point they were also trying to back engineer things. And if you just look at the manufacturing facilities that were backed by the U.S. government in the 60s in the Berkshires, it would blow your mind. There's also Nike missile sites, Minutemen missile sites, underground bases there that, there's all kinds of stuff. For anyone not to tie this in is like, it's almost ridiculous not to understand that, this is not only a possibility, this is probably what happened. When you've got that many manufacturing facilities being backed by U.S. government dollars to beat Russia to space, and NASA in your backyard, and then you've got all this activity that's been there for what? It's been going on for 50 years. It's still seen to this day. Mostly these round spheres. So anyway, so after this event, I came to because I don't know any other way to word it. But when I came out of this, we were already back at the diner. My grandmother was the first to come to. We didn't come to at the same time, which is another thing that makes me believe that we were drugged. Those packets that were put on our bodies. Oh. My grandmother and my mother were reversed in the seat. My grandmother was now in the driver's seat when she came to. The ignition was off. The lights were off, obviously. My brother and I were in the same positions in the back seat, but they were reversed. And so my grandmother, who, like I said, on Unsolved Mysteries, never drove. She didn't really drive back in the 60s. 50-year-olds didn't typically drive, right? She could, but she didn't. You know what I mean? She had a driver's license. So she took the car down the road, turned around, and went back to town because town was only like 3/4 of a mile away, where our house was like several miles away. So she went back for help because my mother wasn't responding to her. I wasn't, my brother. We were all out. She didn't know what to make of this. And she was nervous. She was shook. She was scared, So we went back to town, walked in the silk store. She asked for help. I heard the door slam or something. I remember just waking up a little bit in the back and seeing her walk into Silk's store, and nobody was responding to me either. So I got out and started, Nana, I called her Nana, followed her into the store. And when she walked in, she was I remember watching her walk straight past the clerk to the back wall, and there were baby carriages and strollers in there. And so she started grabbing the strollers and everything. Next thing, she's like in with the bikes and everything. It was like a general store, and I'm grabbing her hand, trying to call her, like pull her through the bikes and stuff. It was really kind of a sad scene in a lot of ways. But the guy from the convenience store, silk store, noticed us and, "Are you guys okay?" My grandmother went to talk to him about getting some help, and then she saw my mother was now standing out in front of the car. And so she never said anything. But if she had said something, she would have known that Tom J, the radio personality for WSBS Radio, was already on the air asking people to call in if they had seen something. He had already gone on the air asking for people to help the police department locate this craft that we were just involved with. So Tom J.
And I heard he'd gotten more than 40, 50 calls himself once he said that about, did you see something?
Yeah. So during this time, Tom J was on the phone with the police department. And at the time, the police department were not in they would go home. There in Sheffield, there was only 2 cops. There was Galata and the other cop. Yeah, they went home. And in Great Barrington, there were more, but again, they weren't at the police department. So Tom J was a ham radio operator. You're right. So he was on doing the ham radio thing, or whatever, CB, whatever it is, and heard that these sightings were taking place. So he called the police department, and they said, "Well, why don't you go back on the air and have people call you and see what's going on?" Because at the time it was just like, whatever, who knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so he gets on the air. He's like, "Hey guys, give WSBS a buzz. We're getting these reports of something in the air. We just need to know where it is so that we can dispatch an officer to go clear the air and see what it is." And so that was heard by some people at Jug Inn Resort during a golf tournament. And so they called up. That's how it got that Hynek classification, or the CE classification, was from people at the country club. And then Jan Green, who was an Unsolved Mystery, she drives all the way back to WSBS Radio and knocks on the door and says, "I saw it myself." And he was joking with her a little bit about swamp gas thing, because
everybody said swamp gas.
Yeah,
it's like
know what I mean?
Oh, look at swamp gas. Really? Swamp gas? Wow. I guess swamp gas is everywhere.
Yeah, it explains everything. It explains everything, right? I mean, if you don't know what it is, it's swamp gas. Exactly. That's how ridiculous some of this is, and why people are like, that's why I cleared the air, because a lot of people don't know any of this. And so that was true. That Tom Warner thing, you can dismiss that. That was just somebody who answered a phone and wanted to be on Unsolved Mysteries. So clear the air with that one. But Melanie was telling the truth. She was up the lake. Now here's something else that Unsolved Mysteries did that I think was fantastic. They actually showed the flight path of this thing. They showed part of it. They showed it coming from Pittsfield through Lenox, Lee, Stockbridge. It went over the water Lake Mansfield when Melanie was there. And then it came back over the top of Egremont. Did you see the actual article? There's an actual article that was in the paper about it back in the 60s. They reran. It's on my website. You can actually pull it up.
And let me tell people in the chat who's watching this, if you guys are subscribed to Netflix, Unsolved Mysteries is right there on Netflix, and his story that he was on himself, you can watch it on Netflix if you have Netflix.
Yeah. And by the way, that was probably the worst documentary ever done. It was one of 7 or 8, and it was by far the weakest. And I'll tell you why. They cut out every single document.
Oh,
every single one.
I mean, I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but while we're on the topic, so here's the actual
Here,
induction into state
let me
by
pop this
by
up because I think they
yeah.
could probably see it better.
Well, I got the originals right here.
Oh, you got
So
the original.
that's from right. So Unsolved Mysteries filmed these and never used them. They cut them out.
And this is yours right here. This is the original you put on your website.
Yeah, that's the original.
And this is the actual Historian Society, basically making it part of the community.
It's archived into. It's the first to be officially archived as historically true in America. And you can see right here, you know, it says September 1st. It's Blue Book. They want like all this information. If you look at the Hynek classification and the stuff about the United Nations, that all came from the Roswell Research Library. You know, you had the wife of an attorney who was paralegal at the time, working with her husband, had gone to Roswell and researched any and all information she could find on the 1969. Right. Yeah. That's not Debbie. That's not the attorney. That's Debbie Oberman, the director of the Historical Society. There's actually three Debbie. Yeah, there's three Debbies: Debbie Smith, Debbie Oberman, and Debbie Kessler. Kessler was the wife of the attorney who was working with the Historical Society and I to mine for source documents. So she went to Roswell, and then she found a lot of the information there. She sent it back to Massachusetts, and then that was either ruled an authentic document or not. And this stack of papers that many came from the Roswell Research Library, copies of them did, were used to rule on this. And so after that, the Roswell Daily Record did an article on it.
There's the website. Everybody in the chat, there's the website right there to what I'm showing you. So if you guys want to read it yourself, that's easier because I know you're watching this on the screen. But right there, click on the link. That's his website. And you can look at this anytime you want and make it easier for yourself to read.
Right. And so anyway, if you go down a little further, I'll see if there's an article there. For the Roswell Daily Record did a follow-up article not that long ago, maybe a year or so ago.
I am gonna go down there, but what is cool that you actually have channels and people that sponsor, you know, the park and all this, that people are behind this. And like you said right here, Roswell Museum is one of the sponsors, and that's fantastic when you can get sponsors to, you know, to believe in it, to back it up. Travel Channel, UFO Witness. I mean, that's important. Here we go. There's the. I'm trying to make it smaller. There we go. There you are.
Oh. Yeah, they did a follow-up article because they sponsor my park, and they know that I hold some conferences, and so I was asked to hold a conference during spring break after COVID because the impact that you know, some of this over the last couple of years, you know, the breakout, if you will, you know, they didn't want their stores to go out of business because tourism was down. And so they asked me to hold an event there to, you know, try to help stimulate the economy again, you know.
And but if people don't recognize the thumbnail right there, you see in this video is the park. You guys, look at it. It's a thumbnail. That
I see that. I saw that. It was pretty cool, actually. Yeah, so that telescope just went in too. So here's one more thing for your viewers. So this is in 2015, the Boston Globe, and at the bottom is yours truly and our case being inducted into United States history. So when people say to me, you know, Tom, tell me what happened, I'm not the only one telling you what happened. The state of Massachusetts is telling you what happened. And so for that, I have a responsibility to keep it honest and not let this get turned into a joke, because if so, I could lose all the sponsors, the people who, you know, back me. I don't want the Roswell UFO Museum, you know, saying, Tom, what are you doing? You know, because if I take liberties or say something that's not, you know, maybe like I keep my feelings to myself. I'll tell you exactly what happened. It's up to you at that point. As far as what I think happened, yeah, I've got a lot of ideas of what was going on, but you know, some of it sounds a little far-fetched. And I can't afford to lose the sponsors or backers that I have. You understand where I'm going with this, Eric?
But Tom, no, it's interesting. what you're doing, first of all, is fantastic. And not just because you're part of it. I know what you're saying, because for whatever reason, Roswell is the biggest name. I mean, even if other events, my opinion, are bigger than Roswell, Roswell just has a name. Like where I live in the same town where the Mary Island incident has happened. Happened 2 months before Roswell, with Men in Black, secret meetings in Tacoma that's recorded, a T-bomber that actually crashed with 2 officers who investigated, who had an item. Your story in like Mary Island, some reason it's not like not disrespecting, not up to like the name Roswell, where I could probably make the case to say that I think Mary Island, your story, is bigger than Roswell. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not trying to just.
No, I know exactly what you mean. It's like, Betty Barney Hill, Travis Walton, those are huge cases. But the thing is, but what happened with us in a small town, we didn't have major media outlets, for one.
But you had over 250 people report it, 50 people called a
Right.
radio station, and no offense to Roswell, one person drove up the farmer to the crash. It wasn't like that was seen by 200 people.
Yeah, but you also had the armed services swarming the place too, so that got attention.
True. The armed forces, but I'm talking about like the blue collar people of town.
Right.
The ones,
right.
But
something else people aren't aware of either. Our case actually went out on Channel 4, New York City afterwards. And it was written in the newspaper. It came out in the newspapers. But again, you're talking about a smaller town in the Berkshires, and didn't get picked up. Well, it did actually. It went out on the news. One area, and I think it went out on Channel 4, New York City.
No, you're right. You're right. If the Mary Island would have happened in the city of Seattle,
it would have been over.
Yeah.
That would have been the case to be reckoned with. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why I think all these stories are important. But let me ask you, Thom, of all the people you talk to in your town, what you guys experienced in that car, was there anybody else in that town that had that part of the experience? I'm not saying it's a good experience or not, but they were in a car and they ran into some kind of a light, like what you guys did.
Well, the closest one I would say would have been Kirchdorfer. Melanie Kirchdorfer and her father, they were in a car at Lake Mansfield. So they were also in a car, and they were, it wasn't like they were in bed and that kind of thing. No, they were in a vehicle also. They were going for a swim at the lake, and I back her. I mean, I know for a fact she's being honest in what she's telling me. And something else I want to tell you, just because you bring up a good point. So our diner, this is really important, and it goes in. I'm going to circle back around. So our diner, was the spot for everyone to eat in the morning. Okay, because it was the closest restaurant to the schools, the racetrack, and it was really one of the only places to eat in town. In town, right? It had music, had a jukebox. So Melanie Kirchdorfer, who was in Unsolved Mysteries, who I hadn't seen in 45, 50 years, used to come in our diner, and she used to order grilled cheese sandwiches with onions, sauteed onions. It was just a different type of thing. So my mom remembered it, So her and her boyfriend used to eat there. Years later, she gets on Unsolved Mysteries with me. Kevin Titus, who was just an everyday, kid who's used to know my father later on when he was in office. He was a lawyer, like I said. He was a mayor, acting mayor, and knew my father. He would eat in our diner. And so a lot of the people today that have ruled on or given testimony to or backed our case locally were those children who dined in our eatery, who ate in our diner. And so when it came to a ruling in this, the state and the historical society got together with these testimonies of other people, whether they were in a car or not, they go, I remember that. I was at that 4-H track, like Melanie. I was with my father at the lake. We saw it as we went down that dirt road near the lake. That's how this whole thing snowballed, was from those kids who ate in our diner. And the reason they ate at our diner, that was so royal back then, that the school bus didn't go to everybody's house. Right. It went to the end of the street. Their parents, who were farmers, corn, whatever it was, their husbands would work in the fields, and the wives would bring their children to the bus stop, and they would all get on the bus and be taken to school. Or they could just drive their children to our diner. They would all eat there with me. All of us would eat there together, and my mom would run a tab. And at the end of the month, they'd pay their tab or week, whatever it was. And then we would all ride our little banana seat bikes together to school. It was those children that backed us with the state because they remembered the conversations. They remembered what they saw. In fourth grade, many of these kids had sketched the UFOs they saw, and they taped them to the bottom of the chalkboard. You put the chalk in school, taped them to that whole railing. And by, I don't know, by the second or third week of school, there were all these drawings from what all these children saw. And those children started to eat in our diner together. And then you saw that divide. You saw the kids that thought it was all stupid and the ones that didn't believe in the topic. And all of a sudden you had this group of kids that were now getting together who didn't usually hang out together, talking about what they experienced. And so my mom would take all these French fries and deep fry them in bacon fat and give us all quarters for the jukebox. And that's how this whole thing never went away. We just kept talking and talking and talking, trying to figure out what happened. And so that's how it got to the UN too, because when my father, was approached because of the talk in the diner, let's see if this case has any connections to the Hudson River Valley sightings, which were also just 45 minutes away. So this case went in support of the Hudson River Valley sightings. And of course, then my father lost his life on the anniversary of that date. So that's it in a nutshell.
Let me ask you, Tom. Like I said, we talked earlier, like how articles get things wrong. And I'm going to be first to be honest. I titled the show based on an article name, and the article said the UFO encounter that tore a U.S. community apart. That's what the title of an article about Berkshire said. When I'm listening to you, it sounds like it's the opposite. You had a community that maybe they were shaking when it first happened, but instead of being torn apart, it sounds like they all got together and supported the town.
There's that, but the truth of the matter is we basically had to leave. People.
So it did tear the community apart.
Yeah, there was also cattle mutilations that took place right down from our diner too that didn't get on Unsolved Mysteries, although they filmed it. So I would say that we were outsiders to begin with. We were from New York and moved to Massachusetts. We had the diner. It was a different vibe. The dynamic was, not what my parents were used to. And when we had this happen, because like I said, the 1969 incident was the one that kind of put a Band-Aid on it, like you were alluding to, kind of like fixed everything because so many people saw it. But we were talking about the sightings in 66 and 67, which were completely, different in many respects. And so we were already talking about it. Like when we saw the sphere and you said, were you guys scared when you saw the sphere? No, because we had seen it already. We had already seen it before. And a lot of the kids, I was with all these kids walking home one day, and we all saw this sphere coming out of the sky, coming right at us. It took like a 90-degree turn, went down where we used to go sledding, then up over houses and dived into the woods. I don't really talk about that because it really has no connection or tie to 69, but a bunch of kids saw that too. So the activity there has been going on for a long time. But once you start talking about it and broadcasting it, people wanted to shut it down. They didn't want to deal with that. Also, there was a horse track in town, a racetrack, a carnival fair. Evel Knievel used to jump there. The fairgrounds in that area was considered the crown jewel of racing. I mean, it was the second largest track to Saratoga. So now you got all these UFOs and government types talking like, no. We need the money and the revenue that comes from the horse track. We need the money for the. Yeah. And then there was the police that were on the, a little bit of the take, to keep, you know how it is. A lot of, I mean, to give you an idea, just picture this for a minute for those on there listening. In 1969, right, $5 was a lot more money than it is now. You would get $5 a car to park on your yard and then walk to the racetrack.
Yep.
They would flip 20 cars a day. And they would keep their children home from high school just to help them move the cars. So this was all like a town that was now being heavily funded by the track. And so there was that we don't need anything negative, you know what I
No,
mean, being
no.
discussed. We don't want to talk about the race. You don't want to talk about the space race or the goodwill message that was manufactured here, went to the moon 6 weeks before the sightings. We want to focus on, what's building this community, not what's tearing it apart.
But Tom, let me ask you this. Now, take away all the stories. Take away everything that has happened. You yourself, how has it changed you? I mean, what do you go through now on a daily basis for yourself? Did you handle it well, in your opinion? Did you struggle with it? Were you afraid that people were going to laugh or not? I mean, how did you handle the whole thing till this day, all the way up to this day? What about you?
Well, I think, we are a family of professionals. This is something that just happened to us. It's not who we are. It's just part of who we are. How it changed me, I think that, I had asked my mother for a camera for my birthday. What do you want for your birthday? I want a camera. And so because I swore if I ever saw this thing again, right, I was going to get a picture of it, right?
You want to be an investigator right away. You're like,
yeah, I wanted to get a picture of it if I could, So anyway, that became my.
The reason I asked, I watched your interview on Fox, and you guys talked about you and your brother both got markings,
Yeah,
and you both have seeing issues. Now, I'm not saying we're blaming exactly on that event, but after you had that event with that light, probably radiation,
yeah,
and you
that's
said,
true.
I think you said, if I heard right, you had 5 surgeries on the eye, so that had an effect on you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll get to that in a second. So you're right. I do. That's why I wear these friggin' things. It's really crazy. I'll get to that. So on the positive side, though, I wanted a camera. That became my career. I ended up working with Northeast Concerts. I ended up working with, I ended up getting trained by Omni Penthouse in New York City, and I worked with Daniel Gallo, and then I ended up having a modeling agency and that kind of thing. But if I didn't have that camera in the very beginning, who knows? Maybe who knows what I would have done. But physically, yes, I have had 5 operations on my eyes. That's true. I can't filter out blue light now. And oddly enough, I have the same eye condition that Melanie Kirchdorfer has, which is really rare. So some people will say, refer to it online, if you will, as a lazy eye. Well, most people, when you think of a lazy eye, it's when one eye goes in its own way, right? This has to do with if I get an eye prescription tomorrow and I wear my glasses for a week or 2 down the road, that prescription is no longer any good because my eyes switch constantly. 1 minute it's okay, then it's not. So I get another prescription. The doctor's like, oh, that prescription's not good for you. I don't know why you got these. I go get another one. And they're like, it does it again and again and again. So I have to have like the stack of glasses because every now and then my eyes are totally different and your
brother also?
Not as bad, but yes.
But
he's actually going blind. So am I actually, So I have to have these certain filters. Even during the daytime, I have to wear these filters because my eyes no longer block out blue light, infrared light, UV light. So I've had to have discs put in my eyes to help block that. So everything to me looks a little bit darker. Then I need these friggin' particular glasses that are, a little big.
Losing hair around 22, right?
I'm sorry?
Both of you started losing hair at a young age around 22.
Yeah, I went, my brother and I, nobody else in our family has had a problem like this, but he and I are.
Honestly, do you and your brother believe this condition is related to that day?
Yeah, and because it's such a rare eye condition, and to have Melanie, who I support 100%, who was in Unsolved Mysteries, she has the same eye condition. So if something's this rare and she has the same type of eye condition I do, and my brother and the 3 of us were involved in the same incident as children, yeah, I mean, where's the common denominator? I mean, it's possible it's just a
fluke. Chances of that, right?
And what's the chances that my father would be murdered on the anniversary of our case going before the United Nations in support of General Assembly 33-426? Do you know our lawyer also died shortly after my father, the one who took it before the United Nations? So I would say that, there's another aspect to this too. So in the 60s, I don't know how old you are, but in the 60s,
I'm 50.
How old?
I'm 50.
Okay, so you might remember that the O negative blood group used to be the universal donor for NOM.
Yeah.
So I'm O negative. There's 9 of us in our family that are RH negative. 9.
My brother is too.
Okay, so my body temperature runs at 97.1, not 98.6. It's almost 2 points below normal. And so I say to myself, well, what is it that, why would a blood type change your entire body's temperature by 2 points? It shouldn't. So I believe that there is a race within a race. I believe it's just like a horse or a dog or anything else. There's different lines of human beings, just like there is, anything else. And if you are looking for a good din from elsewhere, and you're like, okay, we're gonna we'll use the term abduct someone, but if you're interested in a certain person or what have you, you're going to look for that line or that group that you know to be true and good, just like you're looking for a pit bull or whatever, a racehorse. You go for those genes that have what you're looking for in a personality and a trait. And so I believe that there is individuals being targeted for that reason. Now, were we selected? Were we chosen? Were we at the wrong place at the wrong time? I don't know. I don't think so, because it happened to us several times while we lived there, just like it still happens to a lot of people to this day. I mean, the Sheffield UFO incident, if you will, aka Berkshire's UFO, our case that went to the UN, that case is one of many that took place there. I mean, this is a very active area. It's just that, my father was political and goddamn phone.
No problem. You know what, Tom? I try to keep the chat words off the screen because I want to be more about you. But somebody did write something that is interesting. I'm just gonna. Now it says, sounds like being a child saved his life if all the adults were murdered around the same time.
No, a lot of adults weren't murdered. Just my father.
Just your father, okay.
And our attorney, who died after my father went to the UN. But I would say this, though, to that person who's on the right track here, that a lot of people were pushed out of town, were assaulted. It was not easy. And so maybe not murdered, but definitely badgered and harassed and run out of town. I'm going in so many different records right now. I was actually beaten by police officers. And Linda Farrell, who's on my Facebook to this day, went to Superior Court with us. We were beaten down. I was left in a pool of blood. And we took these officers to Superior Court in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I still have the original articles in my bag right next to me. And so to give you an idea, this is how those who were speaking out publicly were treated locally. And that's why the talks ended up being in our diner about this. And that's why it was kept kind of hush-hush, because hypothetically, Eric, let's say your father or your mother or your sister was working at Sprague Electric or Berkshire Dynamics on a space race. And then your child is going to school with my child. And all of a sudden, your child starts telling everyone about UFOs and how, we're going to, and you're like, son, you can't talk like that. I could lose my job, because you are bound by a secret space program. So the fact that you could not discuss this openly created problems for people who wanted to continue their employment with General Electric or Sprague Electric or Berkshire Dynamics. That's why it was hushed. That's why it was, kept down. Does that make sense? Because that's kind of why. So when we were talking openly about it, it aggravated people, because they're like, what are you doing? We half this community is working on the secret space program, and you guys are talking UFOs. You guys got to, shut up already. That's kind of what happened. And of course, we're New Yorkers, so we're like, you're not going to tell me what to do, right? So my family's like, I'll talk about whatever I want in the diner.
Well, see, it makes sense. It makes sense for the government side, because people together are stronger. A community together is stronger. So, we're not going to believe every conspiracy in the world that a government is going to snipe everybody. But the best second thing to do is get everybody spread out to different areas. Because when you're not together, you're not as strong. You're separated.
Right.
So it makes sense to.
Right. So we all grouped together in the diner and that's why our case got so recognized back in the day, because of that group in our diner, because collectively that diner that was owned by my family had altered the natural progression of the community because they stood up, they rose up, and they kind of fought back collectively. By the way, this is actually the actual original article from when I was assaulted by police officers and took them to Superior Court. Yeah, I mean, everything I'm telling you has God's honest truth, man. You know, it's just, it is what it is, and I think that there's so much woven in this case between, you know, government, the UN, you know, my father being a politician, the police, the racetrack, you know, which obviously who owns racetracks, right? So there's an awful lot of there's so much going on here that I think a lot of when the shows come to film, they're like, oh, you know, we don't want to touch that, we don't want to go there, you know, we'll film it, but we're just going to cut that out because it's too raw, you know, it's too deep, you know.
But in the good news, you are in the middle of doing a film right now of your story, correct?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually, and somebody you know too, Anthony's going to be part of that too.
S4, yes.
Yeah, good guy, and yeah, of course, Rihanna and Allie.
Photos of you guys are making it, so that's
so we're doing it. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Who wrote this? I'm curious. Is it basically based on your writing of this documentary that's coming out, or?
All right. So let me back up again because good question. All right. So I started writing a book back in the 80s about this after my father was, you know, approached about the UN type of thing. And then when he died, I put it aside. I was just heartbroken, you know, because when he passed, he had said, well, the time is right, Tom, I'm going to do something with it. And he felt that was the time to do it. And of course, he lost his life in the process of keeping his word to me and my mother. So there's always been a guilt there, you know, that maybe we, you know, we didn't see that coming, you know. And so after that, I started writing a book again. But I just, life gets in the way. I mean, it takes a long time to write a book, you know, and you want to be 100% accurate. So there's got to be investigative type work behind the scenes. So I, was approached by someone at the Roswell Daily Record, you know, because they were part of our case being inducted, Toby Martinez. And he's like, look, if you want to help, you know, want some help writing it, I'll help you. You know, I've got the support of the Roswell Daily Record, you know, to some degree, you know, can't go too far with it, but I'm friends with the owners anyway. And so he's decided to help me write my book. So while writing the book, I was approached by Disney Australia about doing a film with them. But it is out of the country. There's reasons that, you know, we're not going to go forward with it. And so I thought, you know, why go through this again? Why go through the effort of writing a book, handing it over to a film, you know, someone who's going to do a film project, just to find out that they sell it out again? You know, because that's what happens, you know. It's not like they're going to do your film the way you want it. They're going to do a film the way they want it. And of course, what's the chance that it's going to be honest again? Because you have to sign away moral rights. A lot of people don't realize that, but when you do a movie project, you have to sign away. They can turn it into whatever kind of film they want to.
Amityville Horror, the Fire in the Sky. You're talking all the Conjurings. There's core of the story, but they change it to sell tickets, basically.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought this all up is because this documentary is basically an independent company that's not by Fox or
right,
you know, Peacock, whatever they call it, Comcast.
Right. It doesn't have the $16 million budget, you know, we're relinquishing, but it doesn't need to be because it's being told. So I'm writing the book. I've turned over several chapters, a lot of chapters, probably 20 to 30 chapters. And then on top of that, you know, Rihanna and Allie, the producer from Sky Tribe Productions, Sky Tribe Mysteries, has gone out with Anthony too, and we started filming the actual people involved at the location it took place and keeping it all in their words. There's no anything. There's no chopping it up. It's their words by the people that were there at the location it took place. And that doesn't cost a lot of money to do that as long as you have a good film crew, which we're still, fine tuning that as well. The audio needs to be really good. We're trying to do
Well, most
4K.
of the
We're doing
work is behind the
4K. We're
scenes.
trying to do, THX, whatever.
Filming is the easiest part. Behind the scenes is where the real work is. The audio, the sound, editing. I mean, that's the real work making a movie.
Right. So we're kind of doing some of that now. So we're doing it in sections. So yes. So to answer your question, there is a book coming out that is going to be of the same name as a documentary, but this documentary we're doing with Sky Tribe and Anthony, who's involved in this too, is going to be just a really hard-hitting, heartfelt. It's going to be raw, and it's going to. There's no stone unturned. It's going to tell you just, the judge who sealed the documents for the governor. He's in it. Linda Farrell, who was there when I had my head basically broken in by police officers, she's actually testified. Everybody who's anybody, the Galata family, whose father was a chief of police. We've spoken to Sarah, and Eddie Galata was on Unsolved Mysteries. Pretty much the radio station. We filmed at WSBS Radio. We've spoken to the wife of the broadcaster who broadcast this back in the day. We actually got the okay and a license agreement from the Berkshire Record, who ran the article about this in the 60s. We actually have the license agreement to use that original article in our documentary. And even Tim Burchett, Congressman Tim Burchett, we text now and then. He's in it too. So I reached out to Tim. Rihanna Nally and I went to dinner with Congressman Tim Burchett, and he's agreed to be in it. He's already filmed with us. So we've got the congressman. We've got, this is again, my father was political. So that is, I'm sorry.
It's from the heart kind of a project.
Yeah. Really no nonsense, no more, it's time, and if they're not going to tell it honestly, then we will. It's the way it is. Before
we go, because we're at our hour mark, with everything that's going on nowadays, of course, in the last year or so, there's so many UFO conferences and all that. In your own opinion, I'm not saying every conference was great or not, but with people talking more now about UFOs and all that, do you feel maybe we're finally in the right direction, thanks to channels like YouTube, where people do like yourself have the chance to tell your story without being narrated, change from the big corporations?
Well, of course, we're going to have more of a voice. I mean, and that's important, because a lot of us who, if this had happened 30 years ago, our case would have been out in the open a long time ago, more so than it is now. So you need a voice, but at the same time, there's also a lot of stuff that's being woven in that's not true. There's a lot of disinformation. So now you have to weed out what's true and what's not. Like take Grush. Right, Grush with the hearings and all that. I know for a fact that he was only one of several other people that were at the hearings, although they weren't on camera. There was a lot going on behind the scenes that I'm privy to, but I can't mention it. But Grush was kind of what was fed to the general public as the whistleblower, and although he is, but it was all hearsay. It's all third party. There are people there that were able to introduce much more powerful testimony, but that was never shown to the general public. I don't know why my camera's blurry. No. So yeah, and I know that for a fact. So what happened to my camera?
I always say that regardless on how people take the conference, good or bad or not, I look at it in a positive way. Where what if it's a kid's first time watching something on UFOs? That might inspire him to start looking into these cases himself, like reading, studying, trying to contact the people, so regardless of what we think of these conferences, it might inspire people to start looking into things themselves to try to find what the truth is.
You know what I find out that's interesting, to kind of piggyback on where you're going with this. Isn't it interesting how the more factual incidents or encounters or those profound moments, if you will, in someone's life falls second to wow? It's always the wow. That's, look at the hits you get, right? You bring on somebody who you're like, I don't know about that guy, but now you got 2 million hits, right? And you bring on, a John Burroughs and a Travis, myself, or what, whatever, and you're like, people want to be entertained, it seems like, and I think that's the problem that we have even today, is that there's more interest in entertaining people and giving them something, a good story, like you mentioned the word story. I hate that word too because it is a story. Stories meant, the definition is to entertain. And so I'm not here to entertain anybody. I'm here to tell you this is what happened. I don't care if you believe it. I mean, the entire state of Massachusetts says it happened, right? Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I went to the United Nations, for God's sakes, right? I'm on Fox. I'm on News Nation. I mean, I'm telling you the way it is. Maybe it's not as interesting as some cases or some things, but it is. We are part of disclosure, and that to me is what we bring to the table. We don't have to be the most interesting case out there, but we're factual. We're telling the truth, and we're respected for that in mainstream. I don't care about views. But a lot of people do. A lot of course, because you get paid by views on YouTube, right? I mean, if you don't get a lot of hits, right? So now you've got the other side of the coin. You've got those people that are going to just whatever, right? And all of a sudden your channel's blowing up with views. And that kind of happens with the hearings too. You've got certain people that are going to be part of the upcoming talks who maybe aren't legit, but that also, there's a market for that. There's I could tell you more off air, but there's a lot of people that are going to be part of these upcoming talks that maybe aren't as respected in the community, but they have a following, just like everybody else needs, right? And so that's happening in mainstream too. Mainstream needs a following. Yep. So if you're factual and you're to the point, but maybe it's not entertaining enough, maybe you do still fall short to I'll give you another example. Okay. You know what?
I hear you.
Yeah, I could say, yeah. All right. So even Unsolved Mysteries, right? Remember the guy with the long blonde hair, Tom Warner, right?
Yep.
I can tell you right now, he was never part of the guys in the diner. He never came out of our diner. And he wasn't part of that. He was someone who answered the phone at the Historical Society. Yep. Yeah, and he went through the file, got the information. That's why when he said the UFO was only 35 feet, he was the only one who didn't know the actual dimensions because
he read it.
Well, he didn't get that part right, but at the time this followed the Lion King, right? Was it Lion King? No, Tiger King. Tiger King thing.
Tiger King. Yeah.
Tiger. So he had the long hair. He was interesting, right? He was interesting, and so they used him, and that's unfortunately still happens to this day. All shows there has to be an entertainment aspect to it. But then you also have to include the factual stuff, right? Because the facts come in, the entertainment's there, you package it together, and you sell it as a show or whatever. I get a credit when I go on Fox, I get a credit for that on my IMDb page, an actor's credit. Fox, CNN, all of it, they're shows. I'm honored to be on there. Don't get me wrong. I like Jesse Waters and the whole bit, and I love being able to have that as an outlet. But did you know you get an actor's credit? Anyone who's been on Fox, whoever, Lou Elizondo, whoever, go on their page, they give them an actor's credit because theoretically it's a show. It's a show. I'm sick of shows. I'm going to write a powerful book that's going to bite you in the ass. It's going to be raw. And I'm calling people out. I'm calling out everybody. This is going to be this is a powerful friggin' book. And I have to do it. Look at what happened with our monument. Do you remember that? Our monument being moved from the park?
Yep.
They tried to say I put it there. It's 1,000 miles away. I don't live in Massachusetts. I haven't lived in Massachusetts since the 70s, for God's sakes. So, like I somehow moved a 5,000-pound monument onto town property. Really? How would I even do that?
It's so probably 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God, there's a monument here. Tom must have did it.
You cooked yourself up.
Yeah, the town of Sheffield put it there. They put it there. Eddie Lord was our operator for the town's public works department. He put the monument there. They hired an attorney, Copeland Page, out of Boston to oversee it. I mean, I had nothing to do with it. But controversy sells papers. So what did Sheffield do? They started controversy because now they're selling papers and bringing attention to themselves. It's a crazy world we're in, man. And I could get caught up in it like a lot of other people and just, but no, I'm keeping it factual, powerful, and to the point. And, that's all I have to offer this community is honesty and, facts.
And that, yeah. And then they can run with it. Hopefully they want to study it more, read about it more, get ready for your book, the movie. That's what we want. We want, and listen, and I'm sure, Tom, you probably agree with this, and you don't mind people questioning. because you want to answer it properly. So when people have additional questions, that's fine. Question everything. Get to the part to where you feel comfortable on if the the event to you that you could, honestly say, I believe them. That's real. Because listen, it's not 100% real for us because we weren't there. But by listening to people, the 250 people who've seen it, you could probably make a good consumption to yourself on what happened there. And something that happened to you, it's almost like, do I want this to happen to people? Not really, in a way, because you experience eye issues, hair issues, health issues. And that's something we don't want nobody to go through and all that, because just the amount of radiation that had to come out on that event that day.
Have you seen the corn that grows there?
Yeah. Actually, the thumbnail above you, that's a picture of the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the corn grows 15 to 18 feet high. There's people get sick there, upset stomachs. I've interviewed a lot of people we were just there. Anthony was there. We had 3 paranormal teams there. I mean, the boxes were going off left and right. I mean, the cars weren't starting. It was, like I said, this area is like, is a very active area. And I think there's multi-layered. I think there's a lot of different things going on there. And one thing that I want to mention real quick, because I know I'm running out of time here, but there's a power grid in that town. And there's also a lot of quartz and granite in the ground. And there's a lot of talk that this quartz rock is getting almost charged from the power utility. What do you call it? Grid? That's like maybe a half a mile down the road.
Power plant.
And it's also underneath the water. And we had water samples taken. We've again looked at the growth of things, how people are feeling. We've had different types of equipment metering. Everything from electricity to ELF. And it's really weird how much is actually really happening there. And so I don't know if we're treading on, something totally new, or is this just multi-layered, or what all this means, but there's something very odd happening in and around the UFO park.
I tell you what, Tom, we're sometime in the future, we got to do a part 2 in this conversation, because there's so many just to dive into. Like, I want to hear again about the silence part, like when everything went silence, because
right,
I hear a lot of stories. Our story, when we saw the Bigfoot, things went silent. It seemed like the silent part happens when anything that's around like some kind of energy. And it's, what I'm saying is we could dive so much into it. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself coming on today, because we got to do a part 2, because there's just so much to dive into that we're just scratching the surface.
All right, Eric. Well, thanks for having me, buddy. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. Everybody in the chat, thank you guys for being here today, and share this out. Share Thom Reed's story out. Let people know that a book's going to be coming out. And is there a kind of a semi date you guys think that this movie might come out on Amazon?
Yeah, we were hoping for spring. There's a lot. The book and the movie should be coming out in the spring. The book for sure. The movie again has to do with final editing, and and it is coming out. We are working with Darcy Weir, so it's going to be on Amazon Prime. So,
and that's where all the magic is, behind the scenes. And the main thing is to get it done right. Don't rush it.
Yeah, that's just it. We're no rush. It's been 50-something years. I'm not going to rush it.
Summer or fall, you just want it to be right.
Absolutely. Do you have a picture of the cover? If not, it's just curious.
It's on my iPad. I'm on my computer. I talked to you on Messenger.
Yeah. All right.
On my iPad.
Well, that picture was taken right inside the bridge. That was actually in the bridge.
Oh, wow.
The smoke with that boy, that was taken inside the bridge.
And what I'll do, people, later today, I'll put that picture in the community bar so you guys can see it. I just have to send it to myself to the computer, put it on there.
Okay.
And the reason, people, I don't have it on the computer, because you guys all know I just got my computer repaired. I just got it back. So there's a lot of catching up I got to do.
Okay.
But beyond that, everybody, Have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Stanton's going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about the Kraken, the Loch Ness. We're going to be talking about the cryptids of the ocean. You know, we talk about cryptids on land, but there's plenty of stories about cryptids being out in the ocean. So see you guys all tomorrow on the Paranormal Highway.